Our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by our friends at Zapper, the world's leading augmented reality platform and creative studio, with over 11 years of experience working with the world's biggest brands through Zapper Creative Studio. Zapper also has an award-winning web AR platform, ZapWorks, that lets you create your own mobile AR magic. Finally, check out their Zap Box, the most affordable mixed reality headset on the planet. Start creating AR over at zap.works or talk to them about your next AR project at zapper.com. Good morning, everybody. It's Sunday, December 18th, 2022. I'm Charlie Fink with This Week in XR. With me are Rony Abovitz, Ted Shilowitz, and joining us this week, Dean Takahashi from VentureBeat and GamesBeat. Dean, welcome, and thanks for joining us for this special year-end show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
We were just burning it up in the green room before we turned on the recording about possibly the biggest story of 2022, which was in 2021, a year ago, we were talking on the show about the rise of crypto, and now we have its sequel, the fall of crypto. So what do we think is going to happen with crypto in 2023, Ted?
As expected. Oh, in 2023?
Yeah, of course, the crypto people are saying, well, that's good. We're clearing away the dead underbrush so that the forest can flourish.
Yeah, well, what else are they going to say, right? I mean, they've got skin in the game, and that skin hurts, right? I'm one that has skin in the game, although that skin doesn't hurt too much because, when you think about where you got it, if you got in early, like a lot of us did, and where it ended up, and you figure there's, an interesting underbelly of value to this stuff that has proven itself. I was actually thinking about this the other day about the lens of when something that is actually designed to be disruptive and a sidetrack toward the mainstream economy, and for people that sort of have an understanding of this type of community and the value of that community and what its value can be. And then when it sort of gloms over into yesterday's economy, and you end up getting profiteers and grifters and folks that are like, they don't really have an understanding of its true value. They only have an understanding of what its value is to the greater fool theory, to sort of pulling more people into it because their only belief structure is that they're going to make more money with it. And then you have these, of course, pop points where you have huge amounts of effectively, illegal activity and unethical activity that pull all those people down. So in a way, what you said, even though, people are using it to just make themselves feel better, the idea of kind of, culling the herd is a natural effect of that, is that, of course, this was going to happen when this thing jumped the shark and went to mainstream economics, because it's not mainstream economics, right? So I don't know if Dean or Rony agree with that thesis, but that's sort of my thesis on it.
I think that it is this sort of not really a failure of decentralization. It's another failure of centralization, right? And that FTX was very centralized around the SBF, and that that is one of those problems that decentralization is kind of in right now, which is people don't quite understand it, and it just failures like this, I think, are just sort of stalling the revolution, because they're making more people sort of disbelieve in what's properly to blame here, which everybody's blaming decentralization for it. And I think that's kind of the sad thing. It's like a culling that is happening not through the fault of the decentralization folks, right? I think there's sort of like an extra burning going on here on top of the regular proper burning that maybe was already happening, and so it just sort of delays any advances until maybe much later.
There's also an interesting sort of pendulum swing between the idea of no regulation to the idea of over-regulation to the idea of sort of finding its happy middle. And traditional banks went through this too, you know, a century and a half ago, where the idea that there were runs on banks was a real problem. And eventually the government said, you know what, we can build an insurance policy, a safety net, so people feel comfortable with the fact that up to a certain amount of money, we can't protect an unlimited amount of money, but we can protect, in these days, it's $100,000 of US funds in an institution. So even though that institution is a private institution that is profiteering and trading on your money that you keep in their warehouse, as it were, if something goes awry, you're not going to lose it all. You'll lose everything above $100,000. And I think that the crypto world will find its way into that for people to feel confident that they want to park their money into this, if they're not actually understanding the decentralized and the value of the blockchain part of it, but they just feel like this is a better place to put their money because they can see a return on it, then they'll feel better if there was some sort of, you know, multi-government safety net that says we'll protect it as much as this. I think that's probably coming.
Ted, two quick things. One, I just want to pick up on what Dean was saying. I think part of the failure is the architecture of decentralized systems still needs to be perfected. And in a truly decentralized self-sovereign system, there is no group of 30-year-olds who could stick their hand in the cookie jar. And I think what's been happening is groups of people passing off centralized systems that they control with their hand in the cookie jar as true decentralized architecture. So I think that needs to get resolved. And I'm a firm believer in self-sovereign decentralized systems. There are designs that can work, and I don't think we've really seen that emerge fully yet. I think that's one. The second is I think the tokens have to represent real economy. If you're just printing fake things, it's like a company with shares that just has air in it. So I think when a token of a decentralized economy represents something real going on, there'll be like some substance underneath. I think then those two things I think are necessary in order for like that whole sector to move forward from like this year. If you don't fix those two things, I think it's kind of dead. If you
so at the end of the day, it's not the math, it's the humans monkeying around with the math.
And self-sovereign means there are no humans who can be in the loop anymore, right? And it's a system design problem. We can't have our hand in the cookie jar, and that was exactly what happened with FTX.
Yeah.
We were talking last year about play to earn, Dean, and Axie Infinity was having a moment back in December of 2021. So I'm wondering what your thinking is these days of what happened to those play to earn companies over 2022 and what you think we can expect from them, if anything.
Well, I think Axie had always been criticized for not being a fun game, and so when you brought in a lot of people who were again all motivated by making money and not having fun, then I guess everybody realized that it couldn't last, and so when the crypto winter started and the NFT crash happened, games like Axie, where the primary motivation was to make money, then it came grinding to a halt as well. People stopped joining, people stopped paying actual money to get the right to start playing the game, and it really started to look like a Ponzi scheme that was falling apart. And so I think everybody's sort of now sort of trying to learn from that and realizing, get the game part right first, and give people a reason to stick around besides making that money, and then you're off to a good start with a blockchain game. So I think it's pretty basic, and I guess you could see that coming from a long way away. I don't know if I saw any of that last year coming so soon.
Well, there were, in addition to Axie, which had its own smooth love potion as its cryptocurrency. So we have Sand in Sandbox, and Decentraland has its own as the Somnimum space, and all of that value crashed What do you think, Ted? What does that mean for those metaverses trying to start an economy that they have lost so much value in the land, which was what was injecting the liquidity into the economy in the first place?
Yeah, well, Dean hit upon it, right, when he talked about why are you playing this, right? Why is it fun? And we talk about Decentraland and Sandbox and these other places as kind of ghost towns, right? Where they weren't built with the right ethical code, whereas the original Phil's just blanking on, help me the original sort of virtual land
Second Life.
Oh, Second Life.
Yeah, Second Life had a much stronger ethical code, a much stronger reason to exist on planet Earth, on planet virtual Earth, right? So, when you kind of boil it down to it, I was actually thinking there's an author that I think a lot of these folks should read a book or two of or listen to the podcast of, named Simon Sinek, who asked this very, very basic question of start with why, right? What is the why? Why are you doing this? Are you doing it simply to generate profit, or are you doing it because you have a real desire to see something enter into the world that is going to benefit the world in some interesting fashion, to have some benefit to humanity at large? And most of these folks, when it comes right down to it, can't say that. So Simon Sinek is a good touch point for an end of the year podcast. If you haven't watched his podcast about why on why Apple is Apple, and then he wrote a couple of longer books around the whole thesis. The start with why is kind of an interesting subject matter that I would put on people's reading lists.
Shifting the topic a little bit toward our bread and butter and VR here. As you know, a couple of weeks ago, I put forth the thesis that VR may be in a very perilous place. And then John Carmack leaves Meta. And he leaves not without some friction, oddly. He felt it was necessary to explain his departure. And in a sense, he blamed, sort of big corporate culture, Meta specifically, although I suppose given how disgruntled he seems, he was restrained. But what does that say about the moment that VR?
Well, didn't it feel like
he described himself as weary.
Yeah,
I thought that was really remarkable.
Trying to leave for a long time. Like he was trying to sort of extract himself from that soup and sort of stay more in the research side, get out of the mess of trying to make this a commercial thing. And eventually I think he just had it, right? But it wasn't like an instantaneous thing. He's been trying to do for quite a long time, right?
I think he also had some very interesting sort of words in there about how the whole process he found of trying to make really high quality VR as so inefficient, right? And that they seem to argue so much about how to get to the right product or the right thing, and that too often there were other things like bureaucracy just sort of standing in the way. And it is a huge company, and so like you do wonder about like what one person can have. But yeah, when you lose a person like that, who's sort of one of the true believers and guiding lights of the whole industry, then yeah, it definitely creates this sort of pause about like, well, what's going wrong or what's rotten in this kind of company, which should stand out as the one that believes in VR the most, and has the most vision for it, and is willing to make the most short-term sacrifices to get there. And so like when he leaves and he says like there's just lots of things wrong here, then yeah, you wonder, okay, what the hell is going on?
I just want to add to Dean. I totally agree. I think when you have a genius like Carmack, what a company like Meta or any player in the space really needs is like a chief architect, a head designer, kind of like your Jobs, Ives combo, who actually know what they're doing and have a vision and can articulate it, and everyone follows. And I think if you do that, this goes right at his efficiency comment. You could maybe do this at I don't know, 2 to 3 billion a year, not 12 to 15. I mean, if you had that going on with real clarity, I think what you have right now is just like large teams of people spraying money in disparate directions. And the design of XR is so complicated, you could actually spend decades meandering around in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I actually think there's just a handful of people, because I know the sector a lot, who actually know what they're doing. And lots of people who can assemble something with like bits and pieces, and it's like, wait, we only moved 1 yard forward, yet we put 5 billion into it. But the real advancements, I think there's only just a handful of people on the planet who really know what they're doing. And it'll take a while if those people don't get to like drive the whole thing forward. Like, think about the iPhone moving forward to the iPad. If you didn't have Ives and Jobs in charge, you had committees of people, we would probably not be in the iPhone era. We would be somewhere in this weird, mutated, like bizarre cell phone era with like all these variations, and most of them would kind of suck.
I mean, like the
So I think
Windows
it does
phone,
take a genius once in a while to step in and go, boom, this is what we're doing.
like the Windows phone.
Not gonna comment on our
Well,
friends.
you know what, Rony, you've lived this, and I've lived it a little bit, but you've really lived it, about what today's technology economy creates is effectively the unrealistic expectations and speed of success. The investors, the market at large, sort of puts enormous pressure on newfangled or new forms of technology to become successful in a much faster spike than is organically proper, right? So if you go back to the days of Apple or the early stages of Windows or any sort of, like sort of consumer compute, right? The Palm Pilots and everything associated, they had a much easier curve to work, right? And I think they were often surprised at their own success at stage by stage, when they would look at the valuation of their company every 4 to 5 years and scratch their heads and went, well, how did we get so big? I guess people really like this stuff and want this stuff. Versus today's economy, the